Welcome to Evan Talks Podcast, a podcast about my, your, and our mental health journeys. If you enjoy the podcast, it's available every other week, and why not follow us on Instagram and Twitter? Hello and welcome to Evan Talks Podcast. Just before we start this next episode, I just want to explain that there's been a slight change in plan just as the season evolves. I'm learning quite a bit about myself, so I am moving the self-esteem episode later into the series so that I can just do a bit more work on it. It must be the most difficult episode that I've ever had to try and record. So I'm working on that now, and I didn't want to postpone another episode when I've got it recorded. So this week we're actually talking with Nicole around nutrition and mental health. So just wanted to kind of explain before we get stuck into the episode. Without any further delay, here's the episode recorded with Nicole. And if you haven't checked out the YouTube channel, there's a great video to go along with it. So if you want to listen on YouTube this week, just to mix it up and watch. Okay, thanks very much, and I'll speak to you all soon. Hello and welcome back to Evan Talks. This week we are talking nutrition, following last week's talking around self-esteem. I thought it would be a great idea to get a trained expert to talk about nutrition, because heaven knows I don't know enough about nutrition and healthy eating. So today we're going to be talking to Nicole from NM Nutrition. Nicole's been doing her own company, sort of nutritional advice and nutrition coaching, since 2015. And yeah, she's joining us today to kind of talk about her journey, but also to give us some useful information around nutrition. So welcome, Nicole.
Hi, thank you for having me.
No, it's a pleasure. I'm really looking forward to this one because I feel like I'm going to learn a little bit about nutrition that can help me. But before we get into the nitty-gritty, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into nutrition coaching?
Yeah, definitely. So I started, it happened a long time ago actually. So I started training in the gym when I was about 16 years old. And food became an interest to sort of just fuel my training. So I paid a lot of attention to that, before and after, way back when I was a bit younger. So I ate well, and I trained well, and they seemed to sort of go well together. Didn't really know too much about it at the time, but ended up, being less hungry, performing a bit better, and not aching as much after sessions, which was nice. And then people in the gym, just that I would go with, started asking for my advice. And this was pre-qualifications, so I didn't have any idea really. So I couldn't advise anybody. And I thought about that a bit more. And as it became quite an interest, I studied for my first nutrition course back in 2015. And then I just started coaching my friends and family, for free. I just wanted to help them alongside my current job. And it was just a real interest and almost like a hobby, really. Then I wanted to up my game as my business grew. So I recently studied with Mac Nutrition Uni to become an MNU certified nutritionist, which is the world's first evidence-based nutrition course. Fantastic community to be a part of. So yeah, that is the most recent update.
Okay. And you say your business grew. How many people or how much coaching are you doing at the moment with COVID and everything else that's going on? Have you got a lot going on?
I'm currently running a transformation challenge, which has got 12 participants, all women, but I do coach men as well. And then I've got some one-to-one clients on top of that I work with. So at the moment, it's probably about 20 people that I'm working with. And with COVID, things definitely went quiet. People's lives changing a lot and uncertainty. But when I launched the challenge, which started on the 1st of February, I think the people that are on it have said it's given them something to focus on whilst in lockdown and something to do. So it's been really nice to be able to connect with people when serious things are going on in the world. So
good. And how long is the challenge for, just out of interest?
It's a 6-week challenge.
Okay.
And it includes a weekly development talk with me. So something I really like to do with my clients is actually make sure that they, after their time with me, they've learned absolutely all they need to know, or almost all they need to know, to be able to go and carry on their lives and, use that in their day-to-day life, probably in the back of their minds without them realizing, but teaching them tangible stuff that they'll use and, maybe pass on to their kids or their friends if they're struggling with anything. So that's included as well.
That's very cool. That's very cool. So mental health and nutrition, how's that linked? That's a very easy question, but I'm sure it's a very complicated answer.
Very complicated answer. And I think sometimes we use food as a coping mechanism. Mm-hmm. So if we're stressed, sad, depressed, frustrated, we can quite often turn to food for comfort or pleasure. And that's actually really common and something that probably everybody does. It's when when food becomes our only coping mechanism, that it can probably start to have a negative effect on our mental health, especially if, I don't know, for example, you've had a really bad day, you're not in a good place, and you end up really overindulging in food. If that genuinely makes you feel better, great, we all do that. But for me, it's when it's followed with being ashamed or feeling guilty about what's happened and wanting to compensate for it by exercising or going to the gym or whatever that might be. So I think food can have a really big impact on our mental health, depending on, it's a very individual thing. Some people go completely the other way, and if they're stressed, they might not eat at all, and that's still a level of control that you have with food on your body. So yeah, I think that having a good relationship with food is something that we should ultimately always promote. And if you are struggling with mental health and your relationship with food is not very good, and that's a byproduct, and definitely something that you should work with somebody to improve, because it can be quite a strain on your life from personal experiences. Having a bad relationship with food, which I used to, can really take over your life.
Right, and that bad relationship with food that you experienced, do you mind touching on that a bit more?
Yeah, of course. So I competed in a bodybuilding competition in 2017. And it took about 6 months to prepare for it. So I ended up being really low body fat. Stepped on stage in a bikini with a spray tan, looking very orange.
Is that like mandatory? Is that mandatory? Is that expected?
Yeah, mandatory, definitely.
Really?
It's an experience getting the tan before the show. There's yeah, and just before you go on stage, you get like a final glaze, like a donut, I guess.
Do they have somebody there doing all this then?
Yeah, you have to go into like a tent, and take all your clothes off, and there's just somebody there spray tanning you with like an industrial spray tanner. It's quite an experience.
Wow. Okay.
Yes, so that took me about 6 months to prepare for, and part of that was having a very unvaried diet. If you think classic bodybuilding diet, I was eating lots of eggs, rice, potato, chicken, steak, and not much else. Right. So that happened. Competed in the show, did really well. Actually won.
Oh, well done.
Thanks. But what happened after, when I went back to trying to live a bit more of a normal life, eat normal food, I couldn't stop eating the nicer things. So whether that be cereal, donuts, I became really fixated on food, and it's all that I thought about, really took over my life. I would go out for dinner, have a 3-course meal, and then when driving home, stop off at Tesco's and buy 2 packs of cookies and eat them between Tesco's and my house, which was about a 3-minute drive. So it was a real loss of control and binge eating period that lasted probably a year after the actual show. It took me probably a year or just over a year to actually stop, let alone get back into a position of regular eating again, or just being a bit happy and not being fixated on it all the time. So yeah, firsthand, I understand how difficult that is, and that feeling of loss of control and having nothing that you can do about it.
And how, without giving everything away, because obviously it's your business, but like what helped you switch your mindset? Do you think, was there one particular thing, or was it a gradual process that meant that you could start having that healthier relationship with food?
I really wish that I had got a therapist, because after researching a lot more since it happened to me, it would have been a lot easier to speak to a therapist and understand the root of the problem. So I do sometimes work with clients now who have binge eating disorders, but it is always with a therapist. It's
Right.
never alone. I'm just not qualified enough to be able to deal with that. But working alongside a therapist to do both at the same time seems to work really well. But I think for me, the ultimate thing was I just stopped putting pressure on myself. I think I'd noticed that I'd gained 6 or 7 stone in a few months. It was really quite extreme. And I was putting so much pressure on myself to have to lose that weight again and, get back to the stage shape that I was in, which is actually really unhealthy. And I would never aspire to do that now. But the pressure that I was putting on myself was not helping me to stop. It was just making it worse.
Right. So you're not going to compete again, you've decided?
I've thrown in the towel on that one.
It sounds like it was a tremendous journey, and you probably learned a lot through it, but I don't know if it sounds worthwhile doing again at the risk of everything.
Yeah, there's aside from that, there's a lot of physical things that happen to you as a woman when you compete, that things don't quite work as they should. So yeah, I wouldn't do it again. To me, it's just not worthwhile. It's not worth the risk. Definitely it wasn't worth the pain afterwards.
I know, it doesn't sound like it. So what do you think in terms of nutritional information and stuff? We were kind of talking before this about misinformation. Do you want to touch on that a little bit more? Because I think we both agree there's a lot of misinformation out there at the moment, regardless if you're talking about nutritional information or talking about COVID or mental health. There's a lot of misinformation out there. So what is there in terms of what should we as normal people be looking for when it comes to nutritional misinformation, and how would we be able to know what's right and wrong?
Mm-hmm. There's definitely a lot of health-related myths and misconceptions. Some usual culprits that I can think of are the Daily Mail are famous for, taking some information and putting it into a very scaremongering headline. So yeah, I can probably talk a bit about these. There was one in the news a few weeks back, and it wasn't, front page Daily Mail news, but it was somewhere. And it was that artificial sweeteners are worse than sugar. They will make you fat and cause diabetes, etc. Something along those lines. And what they actually took that from is, in a study, they'll do a study and they'll be somewhere such as, I don't know, a McDonald's drive-through at lunchtime, and they will pick people or hand pick things in the study where people ordered, a lot of things on the menu. Maybe it's a large Big Mac meal, some sides, whatever else, and a Diet Coke. And then asked these same people, do you have any, pre-existing health conditions, etc., and then handpicked more of those answers from that study to sort of make it look like it was worse than it was with the information. And then they came to the conclusion that artificial sweeteners, so Diet Coke, is worse for you than normal Coke because it's associated with diabetes and other health conditions. So those are the sorts of things of happen, and then the Daily Mail will turn it into a headline of artificial sweeteners are terrible. And it's, that's just not the case when you actually read into it. Another famous one is when I cut out gluten, I lost weight. And this is more of a probably discussion point around your friends and your family might have done this. They cut out gluten from their diet. Gluten exists in things like pizza, pasta, cakes, breads, all the good stuff.
All the good stuff. That's what I was just thinking. Named everything I like.
And they say they lost weight. So I've cut out gluten from my diet and I've lost weight. And what they've actually done is created a calorie deficit from not consuming all of those foods. So that's why they've ended up losing weight. And it's not actually the gluten. So people that have celiac disease, people that are allergic to gluten, it's actually quite horrific and really not very nice on your gut and your digestive system. So if somebody is gluten intolerant and you remove gluten from their diet, what you usually find is they actually gain weight because their body starts to absorb those nutrients again as their gut starts to heal. So yeah, probably from me on this, just don't believe everything you read in, especially when it's places like the Daily Mail or the Sun, and maybe just have a read into it a bit more, do your own research. I'm always talking about, myth busting is one of my favorite things to do because there's so much information. It's hard to know what's right and what's wrong. So if it's anything like a magic pill or this does this, it's probably worth reading a bit more into it.
Okay. So we've talked a bit about how bad relationships with food can affect you, or your mental health can be affected by bad relationships with food. How would you say nutrition can support your mental and physical health in a positive way?
So I think just I can probably give some tips for optimal health. So probably don't fixate on one thing, or don't worry too much about excluding things from your diet. You don't have to never eat, I don't know, I love almond croissants, so I always use them as an example. But to be healthy, you don't need to cut out the things that you like that forever. So I think top tips would be have a healthy, balanced diet, which is the cliche thing to say, but that really is the overarching message. So thinking lots of plants, so vegetables, grown, things that grow from the ground, raw foods, whole foods, so whole grain rice, things like lentils, beans, pulses, things like that are fantastic. Lots of fiber. So getting enough fiber in your diet will help you to have a healthy gut. And there are millions of connections between your gut and your brain. So if your gut's happy, that's satisfying that area of your brain. So really, really important to get enough fiber in your diet. And it's something that when I first work with clients and I'll say, give me a food diary for 2 or 3 days and I'll have a look at it. And the fiber intake is usually really, really low. So it does take some thinking about, but not too difficult to get up to where you need to be, which is probably about 30 grams of fiber a day.
Okay.
And then just minimizing your consumption of processed foods. So that doesn't mean eliminating them, but that means if a good workshop I like to do is have a look at your week. How often do you eat processed food or get a takeaway and, things like that, and have a pot noodle for lunch because you're in a rush, and just look at ways where you can eliminate that processed food element and make something that's a bit healthy, a bit healthier, a bit more nutritious. And that's not in every single day. every single meal. You don't have to do that, but the majority of it should be a healthy, balanced diet.
And then finally, I guess, optimum health. What should we be eating?
I think
Again,
most of that.
Very open question, but
yeah, most of that I think I've just mentioned. So healthy, balanced diet, plants. Something I like to say to my clients when they go into the supermarket, what vegetables should I eat or what fruits should I eat? If you think inclusion rather than having to exclude any, think a wide range of colours. So the more colours that you can consume of vegetables and fruit, the more likely you are to get a wider range of nutrients in.
Right.
And if you can get, this probably sounds like a lot, but if you can get 25 to 30 different plants in your diet on a weekly basis, you're more likely to be getting the top end of the nutrients that you need.
Right. That's a lot. 25 is a lot, isn't it? That's
25 to 30 different, yeah.
I'm definitely not doing that. Okay.
Nothing to work
on. Okay, and then I suppose how is your mental health? Do you? I mean, without asking you to go into too much detail, I know you've touched on your past, but in terms of what my podcast is all about, which is mental health, obviously, do you feel that you have a good mental health? This is kind of a question I'm asking my guests this season. Good mental health? Poor mental health? Average?
Most of the time, I am in a good place. I'm quite lucky. I have a really good support network, which I think is really important. My partner is a huge support. We actually work in this office together most of the day, so we're spending 24/7 together in lockdown, which has actually been great to be able to spend it with somebody and having that support network all the time when things get difficult. Sometimes at the moment you really miss your friends and family, so being able to call those people as well. I spend a lot of time FaceTiming my family and my friends and just catching up with them and making sure that they're okay as well. So yeah, most of the time I am in a good place. Sometimes I have a bit of a wobble, but I feel like I've got some okay coping mechanisms in place. I quite like to meditate when I feel really overwhelmed. I don't ever really last very long because my thoughts are like just flying around, but sometimes 10 minutes can just, bring me back down to a good place. So yeah, most of the time, okay.
Good. Well, it's been a pleasure to meet you because this is the first time we're meeting, even virtually. So thank you for taking the time out and joining us today. If people wanted to get in touch with you, how best could they do that?
Probably head over to my website, which is nmnutrition.uk, or you can find me on Instagram. Those are probably the best ways, to be honest. Any questions? Sometimes I get quite a few messages through. So if you've got a genuine question that you want to ask, maybe it's best to email me, which is nicole@nmnutrition.uk.
Great. Yes, and I'm following you on Instagram and seen lovely photos of your little sausage dog.
Yeah.
What's his name?
He is called Rolo. He is
Rolo.
The light of my life. He's such a little character.
Yeah, I've got a little French bulldog called Captain, and he is amazing. And, yeah, they make everything so much better during COVID, definitely.
They do. Dogs are great for mental health. They love a cuddle, make you happy. They're just so happy all the time. You can get excited about nothing and they just love it.
You've come back from doing the shopping. Let's have a play. Yeah, great. Well, thank you so much, Nicole. Really good to speak to you. If you need to check out Nicole's Instagram, it's at NM Nutrition, isn't it? At N.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, thank you very much for joining me on this week's episode of Evan Talks. I'll be back in 2 weeks' time and we'll be talking more mental health and more about how we can look after ourselves and look after each other. Thank you, and I will speak to you all soon. Thank you for listening to Evan Talks. And if you'd like to know any other information about Evan Talks, or you would like to get involved, please check out evan-talks.com for more information.